Human fights beside alien girl in the last trench, but human watches the trench speak her past. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The cold air tasted like metal as Eli Carter pressed his gloved hand against the packed dirt wall of the trench, the faint vibration of distant impacts humming through his fingertips. He squinted through the drifting haze, his helmet lights flickering as dust swirled in the narrow space. The world above him had become a blur of muted flashes and rolling clouds of smoke. But down here, the last defense line felt strangely quiet, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Eli adjusted the cracked display on his wrist, watching the battery indicator blink red at 1%. Great, he muttered, breath fogging in the frigid air. Perfect time to run out of juice. He wasn't a hero, not a frontline soldier, just a combat engineer who'd been repairing sensor nodes when everything collapsed. He still smelled the ozone from the overloaded circuits, still heard the muffled thud as the forward outpost went dark. Now all that remained was this narrow strip of dirt and timber, stretching left and right like a scar across the battlefield. A faint tremor ran through the ground, and Eli braced himself, expecting another impact. Instead, he heard a soft, quick rhythm, footsteps dropping into the trench. He spun, instinctively raising his tool harness like a makeshift shield, and froze. The girl landing in the dust beside him wasn't human. Her skin held a pale cerulean glow, catching the weak light like moonlit water. A streak of darker blue ran across her cheek, not a wound but a natural marking. Her armor was lighter than his, shaped to allow swift movement, and it hummed faintly as if tuned to her heartbeat. She looked at him with calm, steady eyes, silver, reflective, unreadable. "Human," she said, her voice low even. "This trench is compromised. Why are you still here?" Eli swallowed hard, lowering his arms but not his guard. "Trying not to freeze," he said, "and hoping the trench stays quiet a little longer." The alien girl tilted her head, studying him as though he was an unexpected variable. The trench lights flickered again, casting their shadows long and thin along the dirt. She touched the wall gently with 2 fingers, and Eli noticed the way her breathing changed, slower, deeper, almost reverent. The wall seemed to answer with a faint, whispering groan, like shifting earth remembering something it didn't want to bring back. Eli shivered, but not from the cold. She closed her eyes for a moment, then turned sharply away, her voice tightening. "We shouldn't stay here." Eli nodded, though he wasn't sure she was talking to him. Something about the way she avoided looking at the wall told him she knew this place. Maybe too well. He steadied his breath, watching her move ahead in the dim trench, her silhouette framed by drifting dust. For the first time since the chaos began, he wasn't alone. And yet, for reasons he couldn't name, the trench suddenly felt as though it was watching them both. The air inside the trench felt heavier as Eli followed the alien girl through the narrow path, the dirt walls rising shoulder high on both sides like a dim hallway carved from earth. The weak lights overhead flickered again, and each pulse painted her silhouette in a soft cerulean glow that made the drifting dust look almost like falling snow. Eli adjusted the strap of his tool harness, the metal clasps clicking softly in the cold. His breath steamed in front of him, mixing with the faint haze that hung in the air. He studied the girl's careful steps, the way her boots barely disturbed the ground, as if she had walked this place long before tonight. She paused near a collapsed support beam, running her hand across the rough surface. Her fingers moved gently, tracing the grain of the wood as if searching for a memory. Eli slowed, unsure if he should interrupt. She did not look back when she spoke. "Your breathing changed," she said quietly. "You are worried." Eli blinked, surprised she noticed. "Hard not to be," he said. "Everything feels like it is holding together by luck." She finally glanced his way, silver eyes steady. "It is not luck. The materials here are old, but the structure remains. The ground remembers how to endure." Eli nodded, though he did not fully understand. He watched her move again, stepping over a shallow puddle where cold water reflected their shapes in broken pieces. A muted rumble rolled through the distance, the kind that traveled through soil rather than air. The trench walls trembled slightly. Eli braced instinctively, but the girl remained calm, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is only the ridge settling." She said the words with a quiet certainty that made him exhale. Her familiarity with the terrain felt deeper than training. It felt personal. They continued forward, the trench curving to the right where the light dimmed further. The narrow turn forced them close, their shoulders nearly touching. Eli caught the faint scent of something clean and cool, like rain on stone. Her armor hummed softly when she breathed. He did not speak. The silence between them felt fragile. She stopped again near another section of the wall, this one smoother, as if the earth had been worn down over time. Without warning, she knelt, pressing her palm to the surface. Her eyes softened, distant. Eli crouched more slowly beside her. "Does it mean something?" he asked. There was a long pause before she answered. "This trench was not always empty," she said. "Before your people came to this place, before the conflict, others stood where we stand now." Her voice remained calm, but her hand trembled slightly against the dirt, almost imperceptibly. Eli watched her expression shift, a quiet struggle behind her silver eyes. He lowered his voice. "People you knew?" She did not answer directly. Instead, she brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear and rose to her feet. "We should keep moving. The support near the center is more stable." Eli stood as well, following her deeper into the winding trench. The lights grew sparse, leaving them guided mostly by instinct and the faint luminescence of her skin. He noticed her shoulders tightening, as though each step carried more weight than the gear she wore. The trench curved again, forming a narrow choke point where the wall leaned inward. They passed through slowly, their hands brushing the dirt as they steadied themselves. Eli touched the wall lightly and felt a faint warmth radiate through the packed earth. He frowned. "Is it supposed to feel warm?" She inhaled slowly, closing her eyes. "The ground keeps memories," she said softly. "Sometimes it lets them rise." Eli did not understand the science or the culture behind her words, but he understood the tone. This place mattered to her in a way she was not ready to share. Not yet. She took a step forward, then another, her posture stiffening with quiet resolve. Eli followed, the dim trench stretching ahead like a path into someone else's past, waiting to be uncovered. The deeper they moved, the more the trench narrowed, as if the earth itself wanted to press closer around them. Eli kept one hand near the wall, letting the texture guide him through the dim path as the lights overhead faded into a soft, unreliable glow. He listened to the faint hum of the alien girl's armor, steady and rhythmic, like a quiet heartbeat in the silence. Her steps slowed near a bend where the ceiling dipped lower, and she lifted her hand, signaling Eli to pause. He felt the air shift, carrying a cool draft from further ahead. It smelled faintly like old timber and cold stone, something untouched for a very long time. She spoke without turning. "Do you hear it?" Eli held his breath, listening. At first he heard nothing, only the soft rustle of dust settling. Then a low sound drifted toward them, not a voice, not wind, but something like a gentle vibration traveling through the packed soil. It was subtle, almost like the hum of distant machinery, but too organic to be metal. "What is that?" Eli whispered. She exhaled slowly. "Memory. This section reacts to presence." Eli blinked. "React how?" "Like sensors." She shook her head. "Older. Before technology. Before any of this." She stepped forward, her palm brushing the wall. The earthen surface responded with a faint warmth, as if welcoming her touch. The hum deepened for a moment, then faded again. Eli watched the way her shoulders lowered, the way her expression shifted from alert to contemplative. She knew this place. He just did not know how deeply. "You have been here before," Eli said quietly. She hesitated, and the pause told him enough. "A long time ago," she said. "When I was very young." Eli followed as she led them around the bend. The trench widened briefly, opening into a small alcove supported by wooden beams smoothed down by years of weather and age. A thin sheet of frost clung to the edges where cold air drifted in from a cracked ventilation shaft above. The girl stepped carefully into the space, her gaze tracking the beams with a focus that felt almost like reverence. Eli sensed the change in her breathing again. It grew shallower, echoing a memory she was trying to steady herself against. If you want to rest, Eli offered gently. We can stop for a moment. She shook her head, though her voice softened. This place is not tiring. It is remembering. Eli frowned at that. Places do not remember, Ryla. It was the first time he used her name. She looked at him, and for a brief heartbeat, her eyes softened with something like gratitude. Not for your people, she said. For mine, memory is part of the ground. What we build shapes it. What we lose shapes it more. Eli scanned the alcove again, noticing faint markings carved into one of the beams. They were worn down, almost erased by time, but he could make out sweeping curves and intersecting lines. They looked ceremonial, almost like a signature. These markings, he said, are they yours? Her gaze followed his to the beam. For a moment she did not answer. Then she reached out, fingertips grazing the carved lines. Not mine, she said softly. My family's. Eli's breath caught. The air between them felt still, weighted. She continued, her voice barely above a whisper. This trench was a shelter once. Before the conflict. Before everything changed. Eli stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. I did not know your people lived here before. She nodded, eyes on the carvings. This was a learning outpost. My parents taught here. I played in these corridors when they were filled with light. Eli looked around at the cold, empty alcove, trying to imagine it the way she described. Warm, lively, filled with voices instead of silence. She lowered her hand from the markings, letting her fingers fall to her side. The day the outpost fell, she said quietly, I was not here. I was sent away on a training mission. When I returned, the place had changed. Eli waited, giving her space. Her silver eyes reflected the dim light, distant but steady. I did not return here after that day, she said. Until now. Eli's voice softened. Thank you for telling me. She drew a slow breath, grounding herself. We should keep moving, she said. The central passage is ahead. Eli followed her back into the narrow trench, the air growing cooler once more. But now the silence felt different. Not empty. Filled with a story that had not yet finished unfolding. The central passage revealed itself slowly, a faint line of cooler air guiding Eli and Ryla toward a wider stretch of the trench. The walls here rose a little higher, curving inward as if the earth were forming a protective arch above them. Eli brushed his glove along the surface, feeling the subtle vibration that seemed to ripple beneath the soil. It reminded him of an old generator humming through a floor, steady and patient. Ryla walked a few steps ahead, her posture more alert now, as though the trench was shifting from memory into something more immediate. Her armor emitted a soft pulse of light with each breath, illuminating the dust motes drifting through the air like tiny floating embers. She slowed near a reinforced section supported by metal plates worn smooth from age. Eli noticed faint markings etched into the metal, different from the carvings earlier. These lines were straighter, cleaner, almost like technical notes rather than ceremonial symbols. What are those? Eli asked quietly. Ryla studied them for a moment, her voice steady but softer than before. They are calibration marks, she said. My mother used to check the structural integrity of the outpost with these guidelines. Eli leaned closer, the metal cool beneath his glove. The lines formed a pattern, a sequence of measurements that suggested careful hands and a disciplined mind. She worked here as an engineer? Eli asked. Like you. Ryla's silver eyes flicked toward him, a faint warmth in her expression. Not like me, she said. She was calm, thoughtful. She believed every structure deserved respect, even the simplest corridor. Eli smiled slightly. Sounds like someone I would have liked. Ryla lowered her gaze back to the markings, her fingers hovering above them, but not quite touching. She said the walls listen, Ryla murmured. And if you are patient enough, they answer. Eli considered that, unsure if she meant it literally or as a metaphor passed through her culture. But before he could ask, a soft sound drifted through the passage, like a gentle shifting beneath the ground. The metal plate warmed slightly under Ryla's hand. Eli stepped closer, instinctively lowering his voice. Is that the trench again? The memory thing. Ryla took a slow breath, steadying herself. It is responding to familiar contact, she said. Echoes, not voices. The past is not alive, but it lingers. Eli watched her eyes shift, reflecting a blend of recognition and sadness. She turned away from the plate and continued walking, but Eli could feel the tension in her shoulders. The passage ahead gradually widened, forming a small junction where three narrow corridors converged. A single overhead lamp flickered faintly, casting long shadows across the branching paths. Ryla checked each one with a measured glance, then pointed toward the left. That path leads to the central shelter, she said. It is where supplies were once stored. Eli nodded, feeling a wave of relief. Maybe there is something we can use. A heater, a battery pack, anything. She hesitated. Possibly. Her tone was even, but Eli sensed something else behind it. Not doubt. Anticipation. He followed her into the left corridor, the air growing noticeably colder. The walls tightened again, forcing them to move single file. Ryla's footsteps softened to a near-silent rhythm, her silhouette outlined by the gentle shimmer of her skin. Eli kept close, his fingers brushing the dirt occasionally for balance. As they approached another bend, a faint draft drifted toward them. It carried a scent Eli could not place, something clean but unfamiliar, almost like air that had been sealed for years and only recently disturbed. Ryla paused, her hand rising instinctively toward the wall. Eli watched the way her breathing deepened, how her eyes lifted with a quiet steadiness. She whispered, more to herself than to him. This place remembers my family. Eli let the silence settle, respecting the moment. Then he stepped beside her, his voice low and sincere. You are not facing it alone. Ryla looked at him, her silver eyes reflecting the dim light, and for the first time since entering the trench, she allowed herself a small, grateful nod. Together, they walked toward the central shelter, the air ahead cool and still, carrying the quiet promise of truth waiting to be uncovered. The corridor leading to the central shelter opened gradually, as though the trench had been holding its breath, and finally chose to exhale. The air felt cleaner here, carrying a faint scent that reminded Eli of cool stone after a long winter. His boots crunched softly on the compacted soil, the sound muted by the stillness wrapping around them. Ryla slowed as they neared a wide archway reinforced with metal beams. The metal looked older than the rest of the trench, marked with tiny specks of oxidation that caught the dim light. Eli noticed the way her fingers brushed the air near the arch, not quite touching but sensing something familiar. This was the entrance, she murmured, her voice steady but quiet. Eli stepped beside her, letting his gaze travel across the structure. To what? He asked gently. Ryla exhaled, a slow breath that clouded faintly in the cold air. To the heart of the outpost, she said. Supplies, records, teaching instruments. My parents spent most of their time here. Eli felt the temperature drop slightly as they crossed under the arch inside. The shelter was larger than he expected, almost circular, with walls reinforced by metallic plating arranged in orderly segments. Shelves lined the perimeter, though most were empty or collapsed, leaving faint outlines where equipment once stood. A broken console rested in one corner, its surface covered in dust that shimmered with her soft blue light. Ryla stepped toward the center, her armor humming gently. She knelt, placing her palm on the floor, and Eli watched as the ground responded with a faint warmth, spreading in a subtle ripple. It was not bright, not loud, just a quiet acknowledgement. It remembers, she said, not looking up. Eli crouched beside her. What does it remember? She hesitated before answering. Routine. Footsteps. Lessons. Eli listened as she spoke, her voice carrying an almost melodic cadence when she talked about the past. Children from nearby sectors visited here. My parents taught them environmental reading, energy management, and structural harmony. They believed knowledge should flow like air, freely and without fear. Eli imagined the shelter filled with young voices, the glow of learning instruments illuminating the walls, the easy rhythm of a place built for growth rather than conflict. Ryla stood slowly, brushing dust from her glove. Her eyes drifted toward a partially collapsed shelf where a small object peeked out from beneath a fallen panel. She approached carefully and reached down, lifting it gently. Eli leaned closer. It was a small cylindrical tube, no larger than a flashlight, made of smooth dark material with a simple band of lighter metal near the top. Ryla turned it over in her hands, her expression shifting. This was my father's, she said softly. A resonance tool. He used it to demonstrate how frequencies interact with structures. She pressed her thumb to the band, and the tool emitted a faint tone, low and soothing, like a soft chime vibrating in the air. The walls responded with a gentle tremor, subtle but unmistakable, as if the entire shelter remembered the sound. Eli's breath caught. The space around them seemed to hum with a quiet recognition, not alive, but echoing something once cherished. Ryla lowered the tool, her fingers tightening around it. He said sound can strengthen a foundation, she whispered. That harmony can hold more weight than force. Eli watched her expression soften, smoothing the tension that had clung to her since they entered the trench. He was right, Eli said. This place is still standing. She looked at him, the silver in her eyes reflecting both gratitude and a hint of vulnerability. Then, slowly, she nodded. It endured, she said, even when we did not. She slipped the resonance tool into a small slot on her armor, the device fitting perfectly as though it belonged there. The air settled around them, quiet once more. Eli glanced around the shelter, noticing a faint glow along the walls, subtle but present. What now? He asked. Ryla took a steady breath. There is one more place, she said. The corridor behind the central beam. It leads to the observation alcove. Eli did not know what waited there, but he could sense its importance from the way her voice softened. He gave a small nod. Lead the way. Together, they moved toward the far side of the shelter, where a narrow opening waited like a doorway into the past, ready to reveal what the trench had held in silence for so many years. The narrow opening behind the central beam felt different from the rest of the shelter, as if the air had been sealed for years and only recently allowed to breathe again. Eli followed Ryla into the passage, the walls narrowing just enough that their shoulders brushed the cool surface. A faint shimmer danced along the packed soil, reacting gently to the soft glow coming from Ryla's armor. She moved slowly, her steps measured, her breathing steady but deeper than before. Eli noticed the shift immediately, sensing that whatever waited ahead was not just another room, but a place carrying personal weight. The corridor curved slightly, guiding them toward a faint glow emanating from an alcove at the far end. The light was pale and soft, almost like moonlight filtered through glass. When they reached the edge of the alcove, Ryla paused. Eli could see her silhouette framed by the gentle glow, her posture poised but not tense, as though she were preparing herself for something long overdue. She stepped inside, and Eli followed, careful not to disturb the quiet that hung in the air. The alcove was small, shaped almost like a half-circle carved into the earth. A single reinforced panel stood at the center of the curved wall, its surface smooth with lines etched in delicate patterns. The patterns formed concentric rings that rippled outward like waves in a still lake. Ryla approached the panel and raised her hand, stopping just short of touching it. The rings brightened slightly, reacting to her proximity. Eli watched her face, noticing the way her eyes softened as memories pressed forward. This was the observation alcove, she said quietly. My parents used it to measure ground shifts and environmental changes. It recorded everything around the outpost. Eli stepped closer. Like a journal? She nodded. A journal written by the earth itself. Ryla drew a slow breath and placed her palm on the panel. The surface responded immediately, glowing with a soft radiance that spread in a gentle ripple outward. The floor beneath them vibrated with a low, steady hum. Eli felt it through his boots, a warm pulse like the heartbeat of the ground. The glow intensified for a moment, then settled into a calm, steady rhythm. Ryla kept her hand on the panel, her eyes drifting across the illuminated rings. This device stores impressions, she said. When people walked through the outpost, worked here, laughed here, their presence left echoes. The alcove used those echoes to track patterns. Eli listened, fascinated. So it remembers the people who were here? Ryla's voice softened. In a way, not their faces, not their voices, but their movements, their energy. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth flow through her palm. I stood here once, she said. When I was young. My father lifted me so I could reach the panel. Eli imagined. A smaller version of her, reaching up with bright wonder, watching the rings light up beneath her touch. When she opened her eyes again, the glow seemed to reflect something gentler inside her. The hum began to shift, forming a slow, rhythmic pattern. It pulsed like footsteps, faint but recognizable, as though the alcove were replaying a memory through sensation rather than sound. Ryla's breath caught softly. Eli watched her expression shift, a tenderness rising beneath the calm. These were my parents' patterns, she whispered. Their movements. The way they worked side by side. The pulses continued, gentle and even, filling the alcove with a quiet sense of presence. Eli felt as though the room had become a soft echo of the past, a place honoring what once existed. Ryla lowered her hand slowly, the glow dimming but not fading entirely. They are gone, she said softly, but the ground still remembers them. Eli stepped beside her, allowing his presence to match the calm of the room. And now, he said quietly, you are remembering with it. Ryla turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes with a look that held gratitude, strength, and something unspoken that did not need to be explained. Together, they stood in the soft glow of the alcove, letting the earth's quiet memories settle gently around them. The glow in the alcove softened until it became nothing more than a faint shimmer on the walls, leaving behind a quiet calm that felt almost warm. Ryla stepped back from the resonance panel, her posture steady but her breathing still carrying the trace of something fragile. Eli watched her for a moment, sensing that the silence around them was not empty but healing. The air shifted again, bringing a cool draft through the narrow corridor behind them. It carried a subtle rustle, almost like the sound of distant wind brushing against metal. Ryla's eyes lifted. She turned her head slightly, listening. Eli followed her gaze, though he heard nothing at first. Then the ground beneath his boots gave a soft, muted tremor, similar to the earlier pulses but different in rhythm. It felt like a gentle reminder, a nudge from the earth urging them forward. The outpost is stabilizing, Ryla said quietly. The alcove's activation stirred deeper currents. It will settle soon. Eli raised an eyebrow. Is that good? Her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. It means the structure remembers balance. It is adapting to our presence. Eli let the idea sink in. A place adapting to them, not resisting. A small reassurance in a landscape that had felt unpredictable from the moment he stepped into the trench. Ryla glanced back toward the resonance panel, her expression thoughtful. My father told me this alcove was designed to help with orientation, she said. Not just for navigation, but for understanding. Eli considered that. Understanding what? She met his eyes, a quiet steadiness in her expression. Ourselves. She turned, motioning gently for him to follow. They left the alcove and entered the narrow corridor again, their footsteps soft against the cool ground. The air grew slightly warmer as they approached the central shelter, the residual glow from the alcove following them like a fading echo. Eli felt a shift inside himself too, a sense of grounding he had not expected when they first entered the trench. The world outside might still be in chaos, but inside these walls, there was a calm born from memory, not fear. As they crossed back into the shelter, Ryla paused near the center, the frost-covered floor faintly illuminated by the small, overhead lamp. She took out the resonance tool and turned it slowly between her fingers. There is a reason I brought you here, she said. Eli nodded, waiting. She looked around the shelter, her gaze drifting across the empty shelves, the smooth metal beams, the faint markings. I wanted to see this place again, she said, but I did not expect to feel it the way I did. Eli listened, sensing the weight of her confession. You are not the same person who left it, he said gently. Coming back was always going to feel different. Her eyes softened. You say that as if you have returned to a place that changed you. Eli shifted slightly, the memory of a quiet workshop at the edge of his hometown flickering through his thoughts. Maybe I have, he said, but I know what it is like to look at a place and see someone you lost. Ryla studied him with a calm curiosity, as if piecing together something unspoken. You understand more than I expected, she said. Eli shrugged lightly. You told me your memories. It is only fair. A faint warmth touched her expression, something nearly like a smile. Then, let me tell you one more, she said softly. She turned toward a small metal panel near one of the rear walls. It was barely noticeable under a thin layer of dust, but Ryla approached it with unmistakable recognition. Eli stepped closer, watching her fingertips hover above the surface. This panel, she said quietly, was used to mark the presence of everyone who lived here. A record of those who stayed, who learned, who taught. Eli felt the quiet settle deeper around them. Your parents? He asked gently. She nodded. Their signatures are here. She drew a breath, steady and full. And there may be one more. Eli frowned slightly. Yours? Her eyes glimmered with a softness he had not seen before. "If the panel remembers me," she said, "then I was part of this place more than I realized." She pressed her hand to the surface. The panel responded with a gentle warmth that spread outward in a soft circle of pale light, revealing faint patterns rising slowly from beneath the dust. Eli watched the lines appear, delicate and purposeful, forming shapes that held history in every curve. Ryla's voice lowered. "It remembers." The quiet moment stretched between them, filled with truth the trench had held for years, now unfolding in the light of her touch. The pale circle of light on the panel widened, revealing more patterns as the dust loosened and drifted away in thin strands. Eli watched the lines with growing awe. They were not random etchings, but carefully shaped signatures, arranged in branching sequences like a family tree woven from light. Ryla traced one set of lines with her fingertips, her voice barely above a whisper. "These two were my parents. Their marks were always here." She hesitated, her fingers hovering over a smaller pattern just beneath the pair. The lines were faint, as though drawn by a hand that had not yet learned strength. "And this," she said softly, "is mine." Eli leaned slightly closer, careful not to disturb the moment. The tiny pattern glowed gently, its curves delicate but unmistakably tied to the others. It looked like a memory frozen in metal. He spoke quietly, letting the weight of the moment guide his tone. "It is still here, Ryla. It never faded." She drew a slow breath, steadying herself as her eyes shimmered with something deep and unspoken. "I thought so much had been erased," she said. "I thought that when the outpost was abandoned, the echoes would disappear too." Eli shook his head gently. "Some things stay even when we leave them behind." The panel pulsed softly beneath her palm, and the light from the etched signatures spread into the surrounding metal, forming a faint glow across the wall. It looked like the entire shelter had inhaled with them. Ryla stepped back and let the glow settle. Her inhale was steady but emotional, as if a knot inside her was slowly loosening. Eli watched her closely, sensing something shifting within her, an understanding of herself, of her past, of why she had returned. "There is something else," she said suddenly, glancing to the far side of the shelter where a narrow vertical seam cut through the metal wall. It looked almost like a doorway, though sealed by time. Eli followed her toward it. "What is this?" he asked. The seam ran from the floor to the ceiling, barely visible except under her glow. Ryla touched the edge. "It is an access door," she said. "A hidden one. My parents kept their most important work behind it." Eli studied the seam. "How do you open it?" She did not answer immediately. Instead, she took out the resonance tool and held it up to the panel beside the seam. The alcove earlier had reacted to her presence, but this door seemed to require something more precise. Ryla inhaled, steadying herself. "My father said the structure responds to harmony," she whispered. She activated the tool, and a low tone hummed through the air. It resonated through the shelter, gentle but firm. The ground beneath them pulsed in response, the airflow shifting subtly, as though the trench itself recognized the frequency. But the door remained closed. Eli frowned slightly. "Maybe it needs something else." Ryla closed her eyes, her expression tightening with concentration. She adjusted the tool, shifting the tone higher, then lower, listening carefully as the shelter responded with subtle vibrations. The air around them warmed. A low rumble, soft and controlled, traveled through the wall. Still, the door held firm. Eli stepped beside her. "What if it needs your signature?" "Like the panel." Ryla looked at the seam, then at the tool in her hand. She pressed her fingertips to the metal surface. The tool hummed gently against her palm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground beneath them pulsed with a pattern identical to the faint imprint on the signature panel, her imprint. The metal door vibrated softly. Ryla breathed in, steady and calm, letting her energy settle into the structure. The resonance tool responded, its tones syncing with her touch, creating a gentle harmonic wave that rippled through the wall. The seam glowed faintly, a slender line of pale blue light tracing its length. Eli stepped back, watching with quiet awe as the trench answered her. With a soft, warm pulse, the door unlocked. It did not swing open dramatically. Instead it slid inward by just an inch, enough to release a faint breath of preserved air that smelled like old paper and something floral. Ryla lowered her hand, her expression shifting from surprise to something deeper. Eli swallowed softly. "Whatever is behind that door," he said. "It is something your parents wanted you to find." Ryla stood before the narrow opening, the cool air drifting past her like a memory returning home. The narrow door eased open just enough for Ryla to slip her fingers into the gap, and with a soft push, the panel slid further inward, releasing another breath of preserved air that felt warmer than the cold shelter behind them. Eli stepped closer, watching the soft blue glow spread along the edges of the hidden chamber. The space beyond was small, barely larger than a walk-in closet, but the moment Ryla stepped inside, the air shifted around them with a quiet sense of recognition. Shelves lined the walls, each holding small objects sealed in transparent containers. None of them were broken or disturbed. Everything seemed untouched, as if time had paused on purpose. Ryla moved slowly, her steps careful, almost reverent. She lifted her hand toward a container on the middle shelf. Inside was a small crystalline sphere no larger than a child's palm. It shimmered faintly under her glow, reflecting soft lavender hues. Eli watched her expression soften. "What is it?" he asked gently. "A memory core," she said. "My parents used it to store learning patterns, stories, and songs." She hesitated, her fingers brushing the lid. "They said it was meant for me when I grew older." Eli felt something settle in his chest, a quiet weight that came from witnessing something deeply personal. Ryla lifted the container carefully, holding it as though it were something delicate and alive. The core inside flickered once, then settled into a soft gleam that reflected in her silver eyes. She set it gently against her armor, and the surface responded with a faint harmonic tone, syncing with her energy. Eli spoke softly, not wanting to disturb the moment. "It is responding to you." Ryla nodded slowly. "It recognizes my signature. It must have been calibrated when I was young." She turned toward the back of the chamber, where a small metal tablet lay on a low pedestal. Its surface held a faint engraving. Ryla approached it, her breath catching slightly as she read the inscription. Eli stepped beside her carefully, letting the dim light reveal the delicate symbols carved into the surface. Ryla translated in a soft, steady voice. "For our daughter. May she remember where she comes from. May she carry this place with her, even when she walks far from home." The words hung in the air between them, gentle and powerful. Ryla traced the inscription with her fingertip, her expression shifting through layers of memory and emotion. Eli remained silent, letting her have the space to feel what she needed to feel. When she finally turned to him, her gaze held something new, clarity, perhaps, or resolve. "I thought this place was lost," she said quietly. "But it waited." Eli nodded. "It waited for you." She held the memory core securely in her hands. "There is something I need to do," she said. "Something my parents wished for." Eli waited, his presence steady. Ryla stepped back into the shelter, carrying the memory core to the center of the room. She knelt, setting it gently on the ground. The core responded, releasing a soft glow that spread in a circular pattern across the floor, illuminating the frost in delicate waves of lavender light. The trench responded as well, a gentle pulse traveling through the walls like an exhale. The glow intensified for a moment, then softened into a calm radiance. Ryla stood, turning toward Eli. Her voice was steady, grounded. "The outpost will remember again," she said. "It will store new patterns, not just what was lost." Eli looked at the glowing core, then back at her. "You brought life back to it." She shook her head gently. "We did." A soft rumble traveled through the ground, warm and even, as if the trench itself acknowledged her words. Ryla stepped beside Eli, her posture no longer weighed by the heaviness she carried when they first entered. Her eyes reflected the soft glow, steady and calm. Eli felt the silence wrap around them, not empty, but filled with meaning. In that quiet, the past settled, the present breathed, and the future began to take shape, held gently in the glow of a memory core and the steady light in Ryla's eyes.